Okay, the categories. First off, Ricky Flicks. I want to start off with MVP. Who, in your eyes, was the MVP of this movie? I want to just start by saying it was down to two people for me, Ricky Flex. I want to know if it was down to the same two for you. So tell me your thoughts on MVP.
Who's down for two for me as well. You have Killian Murphy, the star of this movie, right? But then you have Christopher Nolan. Like Christopher Nolan being the MVP, putting this non-linear story together, something that should be boring, like we just talked about, and just making this the best movie of the year so far. And yes, the Killian Murphy performance is amazing. Perfect casting. I think that was such a great call. But I really want to give it to Nolan. Just like the writing, directing is a really tough call. I think the editing, the sound design, everything in that nature was also great. So like it wasn't just Nolan. So I'm leaning towards giving it to Killian Murphy, but it's hard to like knock no or not to give it to Nolan.
It's Nolan. Nolan's the MVP of this movie. We know, like, obviously, Killian's the star as Oppenheimer, but I think Nolan put him in the position to succeed in this movie. As the writer of this film, he is surrounded by so many big name actors. And you might find this as a criticism for the movie, how there's not much character development aside from any character aside from Oppenheimer. But that just goes with like the writing of this movie in the first person perspective in my eyes. And that's what this movie, that's how it was written famously, right? With where it's Oppenheimer at all times. It all comes back to him. And I think there were amazing performances around him. But Killian, he anchored this movie. But I think Nolan put him in the position to do so. And I think, again, it was a perfect compliment. It was a compliment between Nolan and Killian Murphy. Killian Murphy was a perfect casting because what I said before, he has such intense emotions on his face with the IMAX camera, which obviously zooms in on the actors. And when you have a movie going over the morality and the struggle of this man, I think Killian portrayed it excellently with the eyes that are bulging out of his head that made it seem like he had veins popping out of his head about to explode because he didn't know if he was doing the right or wrong thing. And he did feel the weight of the world on him. And then you see that through the later conversation he has with President Truman, played by Gary Oldman, where it's like, I feel like I have blackness on my hands. And then basically Oldman calls him a pussy, in a very, very, I think,
Yeah,
interesting
blood on my
scene.
hands. Yeah,
Yeah. Did he say blood on my hands?
I think so.
Oh, because then Oldman throws like the napkin on him, right? Or the kerchief, whatever it is. But I think it was just a perfect compliment of what Killian can do so well and what Nolan needed with the IMAX camera. And he did anchor the movie. I thought emotionally, dude, he brought it. He brought it. He was a complex figure and he was displayed as such by Killian Murphy. Killian Murphy, acting wise, carries this movie, but there's so much that's happening outside of just the acting here. And as the conductor, the leader of the ship, this movie does not work, I think, to the level it does without Christopher Nolan. That's why he's my MVP.
Yeah, I think I don't think you can find a better person to play Oppenheimer than Killian Murphy,
No,
but you definitely can't find anyone else that could do this movie, than Christopher Nolan. Like, I think it was more perfect for Nolan
like
than perfect
directed
for
in
Killian.
his way. Like
Yeah,
it's so different than any other biopic I've ever seen.
right. So, like, if you look at, like, David Fincher, when he did Mank, like, this is so much better than Mank, and that was a non-linear story that wasn't that exciting, but it's something that's very important. Like basically the greatest movie of all time, allegedly. Like I'm just thinking of other great directors that tried this type of story. Like just no one knows how to do this. You think Memento, Inception, Tenet. This is these type of mind twisting, multiple timeline type of story. Dunkirk. It's just like he knows how to do this the best, like the best out of anybody. That's why
Mhm.
like no one else could do this, and no one else could play Oppenheimer as well as Killian, but still, like nobody could have done this like Nolan.
Like new methods of storytelling. That's what it's like Nolan's so good at, just like trying to like move along right, storytelling or how movies are made. That's what he's so good at. And in a way, he kind of parallels like Oppenheimer in like being this genius who's ahead of the curve. I think in a way, like he kind of relates to Oppenheimer, as weird as that sounds, like he is like so important to the future of movies, just like Oppenheimer is so important to the future of like science and like what eventually he is the creator of the most important invention of the 20th century and probably the most important invention ever made. I think that it's a weird parallel, but I think Nolan kind of feels that. I kind of wanted to talk about Nolan more though, and talk about some of the inspirations that he took, because sometimes you see Nolan inspirations, other times you think he's kind of doing something new. And I think this is like the movie where you start to pull like, oh, that looks like JFK, like when he's doing the courtroom sequences and going from black and white to color. And then I saw an interesting comment on Twitter where there was a comparison to Amadeus. And I think no one even talked about how Amadeus was an inspiration for this film that you clearly see in the third act between Oppenheimer and Strauss, just like you see the rivalry in the movie Amadeus. I Did you like sense a little bit more than usual? I know what I immediately think of is like Heat and The Dark Knight, like those kind of like you can see the influence there. But other Nolan movies, I'm like, nah, he's like kind of doing his own thing. This is where the inspirations kind of like shine through a little bit. No,
Yeah, like, I also think Memento, just the color, non-lineage, like kind of like past and
yeah,
present, kind of connecting. Definitely, that was the first one that came to my mind. But JFK is the clear, like not conspiracy in this situation, but like kind of conspiracy, I guess. 'Cause-
truth and like
Yeah,
objective versus subjective, which you talked
e-
about the black and white versus color. Yeah,
exactly. The subjective and versus the objective being the black and white, the subjective being the color. Like exactly. So that's like why I think of Memento. But JFK, just because the quote unquote trial in this movie and everything like that. By the way, courtroom drama, take that off the list. This counts. This
yeah.
counts.
We talked about what like last podcast. If you guys aren't returning listeners, what we want to see Nolan do next, and Ricky said the courtroom drama. You basically get it, although these weren't technically courtroom
Technically.
cases. You know, um, yeah, I watched JFK last night. I loved it. It was so good. It was that final monologue from Costner with the flashes and the edits. I think also like JFK just so tightly edited. Right, this movie. It's like I think also going black, like you talk black and white color, yeah, but also having like the narration in the background, like that's where I saw it. I'm like, oh, that's Oppenheimer. You clearly drawing from there.